Welcome back to Illini Bears Talk. It's been a while since you guys have probably seen us. I mean, there's not really much to tell you guys. The Bears suck. It's been a terrible season. Um, but they have probably the most important hiring in the history of this franchise, I could argue, with this upcoming coaching carousel. And the question all Bears fans have been wondering is what they're going to do with Ben Johnson. Is he going to be the next Bears head coach since he is the hottest candidate maybe we have seen in years, maybe since Kyle Shanahan. So Sam, can you give us the latest on what you've heard regarding Ben Johnson?
Yeah, so starting off with Ryan Poles, first of all, Ryan Poles is safe. He's not going to get fired, is what I'm hearing. He will be the next general manager with the new head coach we do hire. If it's Ben Johnson or not, he is going to be extended. It might be a 2-year contract, is what I'm hearing. But that's besides the point. Ben Johnson is actually open to work with Ryan Poles. He's not opposed to Ryan Poles as much as what he's opposed to is the upper management, such as the McCaskies. He thinks they're dysfunctional. I mean, we all do. We all think that. I mean, they're not the best owners in the world. And obviously, recently the Jacksonville Jaguars have been hot in the news recently, saying that they're willing to offer a lot of money, and that is true. They are willing to offer tons of money for Ben Johnson being a first-time head coach. And for reference, like Matt Eberflus, he was being paid $4.5 million, which is very little. And I'm hearing that the Jaguars are willing to offer somewhere in the 14 to 15 million range per year, which is really large. And the Bears obviously are probably not going to match that, but Ben Johnson has made it clear that his number one landing spot is Chicago. He prefers that over Jacksonville. And he knows that the Bears won't offer as much as Jacksonville, but that is his place he wants to go to. So basically, his camp is using the Jaguars to basically just raise his price. They're feeding the information to Albert Breer, Tom Pelissero, people like that, to make it sound like he wants to go to Jacksonville. And to be fair, there is some truth that he would go to Jacksonville, if so be it. Like if the Bears do not like give him an offer that they like. I'm also hearing that the Bears finalized a historic contract offer for Ben Johnson. They obviously haven't sent it out because of tampering, but like Warren was indeed given the green light. It would be a lot of money for the Bears franchise, not really for any other franchises, just because our owners are very stingy. But I think the Bears will still go with Ben Johnson. I think he will be the head coach of the Chicago Bears. It seems like that's how it's trending. And yeah, I mean, that's the latest for Ben Johnson in that case.
Yeah, and I mean, as all Bears fans know, we have some of the poorest owners in the league since this is a franchise that has been handed down to the McCaskies rather than, some large owner investment group that has come in and bought the Bears. So they don't have as much money as, the Jags with Shahid Khan, who is a Illinois alum, matter of
Illinois
fact.
alum.
And so they have a lot more money to offer, but I think there are reasons for Ben Johnson to, be more attracted to the Bears opening, given that Caleb is still raw and only in his second year versus Trevor Lawrence, who's under a mega deal. So he's kind of locked into, what he has to work with Trevor Lawrence versus Caleb, who's more malleable as a quarterback, and he can really get his scheme in there and shape it how he wants. Another name that has been thrown around, or actually I'll say a couple, Brian Flores and Diana Rossini dropped this name, Anthony Weaver. Uh, so Sam, do you feel that Ryan Poles right now is just trying to save his job by mentioning people who would be more willing to work with him, or do you think these are more smokescreen names? Is there any validity to what is being said right now with these names being thrown out there?
So starting with Anthony Weaver, I mean, I'll be honest with you guys. I would never even think he would be a candidate. I have no information on if he's actually a serious candidate or not. But if we do end up giving him a finalist position or anything like that, it's literally the equivalent of a Matt Eberflus hire. Like he's the most random guy out of all these big names. There's no reason to do that. Maybe because you can pay him like $3 million a year, but I don't. I mean, I have no idea if we actually like Anthony Weaver to this point, but Diana Rossini is the only one saying that, and I haven't heard it from multiple other people, so I don't believe the validity of that, to be fair. But Anthony Weaver, wouldn't expect him to be next head coach, probably just a name on the list. But what I do expect is Brian Flores is probably going to be one of the finalists for the head coaching position. If we miss out on Ben Johnson, if the Jaguars give him a deal he can't say no to, and the Bears can't match, I think Brian Flores will be our next head coach. I think he's probably going to be a finalist. The word on the street is that Ryan Poles is like teammates with him or whatever on Boston College. That's not really what it is. It's that Kevin Warren is really high on Brian Flores, really sees him as like the leader of the pack. He's the one who's been pushing the leader of men and stuff like that. And to be fair, I'm not really opposed to Brian Flores. I think he's a really good head coach or defensive coordinator. He obviously destroyed Tua Tagovailoa in Miami, but our quarterback's a little bit better than that. I think he would obviously offer a much better plan than what he did with in Miami, where the Bears would probably be enticed by him. He obviously wouldn't cost as much as Ben Johnson, but I feel like he would set our defense straight. No more business decisions, none of that shit anymore. I feel like Brian Flores is not a bad head coaching. Like if Ben Johnson was not available, I would not be opposed at all to get Brian Flores. I know we all want offense, but he's a really good head coaching candidate in general. I just really need to see what they would do with Caleb Williams. But I still am set on Ben Johnson. I don't want anyone else. I feel like he's as good as Kyle Shanahan when he became available. And I would just blank check him, in my opinion. What do you think, Rami?
Yeah, 100%. So Flores, he's not ideal in my eyes. I think he actually is a great head coach, and he probably wherever he gets hired will have success. When he got fired by the Dolphins, it was actually a pretty surprising move that they made. I mean, he had a 24 and 25 record with the Dolphins, but that was also under years where they were tanking. I mean, I remember in his first game, they lost by like 45 to the Ravens. That was Lamar's MVP season. Then that all went downhill from there. But he kind of turned around the Dolphins, who were a tanking team and had a horrible roster. And they made the playoffs twice under him. So that was pretty impressive. But here's the thing. I hate this word leader of men. It really, really bothers me. I hate these ideas of culture building, getting a head coach who knows how to lead the locker room. Do you know what the best culture builder is in the NFL? Is
Wins.
winning games. That's how
Wins.
you build culture in the NFL. You need a guy who has sustained success on offense, okay? That's really the only way that you can keep a winning culture in this building. And I fear bring in any defensive guy or even a guy like Mike Vrabel who brings in their offensive coordinator. That's just not a recipe for continued success. If you want to ask me where I think the Bears should go, it has to be offensive head coach. And if it's not Ben Johnson, then I want one of Joe Brady or Liam Cohen. Just get the best offensive guy into the building, the person who can continue success throughout the decade with Caleb Williams rather than, Brian Flores, who we don't know who's he will bring in as his OC. That's going to be a big question mark. And same with Vrabel or any of these other defensive coordinators. Anthony Weaver, that's like a recipe for a disaster. I mean, you want
Yeah,
to talk
yeah.
about one of the most important hirings in your franchise's history, and you go with an
Anthony
unproven
Weaver.
defensive coordinator like Anthony Weaver.
Sonny
That
Weaver.
would be absolutely ridiculous.
I agree.
Another thing for Bears fans to pay attention to: the Lions and the Vikings play this Sunday for the 1 seed Sunday Night Football. And if you guys aren't familiar with how interviewing works, so you can interview any head coach candidate after the regular season as long as their team is not playing. And that also includes teams that have a bye in the playoffs. So the winner of that game, let's say it's the Lions, they have a bye. The Bears will be able to interview Ben Johnson, but they won't be able to interview Brian Flores because he'll have a game that he's preparing for. So that falls under like the tampering rules that you can't do. And vice versa. If the Vikings win, then you'll probably see the next morning a report that the Bears are interviewing Brian Flores. So that's just something to keep in mind. That game does have slight implications. And I expect in the timeline, if the Lions end up making the Super Bowl, the Bears will have another opportunity to interview Ben Johnson in that bye week where the Pro Bowl is. And I would expect in that time, the Bears come to an agreement with Ben Johnson, and it won't be official. It might get leaked that they came to an agreement, but that will be officially signed after the Super Bowl. So the playoffs do matter. It's going to determine a lot of when we see the Bears potentially hire their head coach, especially given that the two top candidates are on playoff teams that are going to make a deep push.
Very important. I think it's very important. So, just to wrap it up, obviously there's a game tomorrow. None of us care. We win, we lose. Honestly, it's good or better for draft pick. If we win, it's good for Caleb's confidence, but won't really talk about that much. But just to wrap it up here, who is your ideal head coaching candidate, and who do you think we will hire?
I mean, yeah, it has to be Ben Johnson. Guy is, I mean, just so great with his scheme. Actually, I don't even want to call it a scheme because he's not a scheme guy. He's not like Shanahan where he has a specific way he wants to play offense. That's what I love about him. He is so creative and he can really beat you in so many ways. But he's my ideal candidate. And like I said, if it's not him, I want offensive guy. I would want Joe Brady next. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the Bears trust a first-year coordinator, like a first-year head coach that was a coordinator, other than Ben Johnson because he's just such a hot candidate. But that's who ideally I'd want, just the next offensive guy on the board.
Yeah. And then for me, obviously Ben Johnson. I think we will hire Ben Johnson, but if we don't get him, I actually would oppose. I wouldn't oppose the offense, but I would go with Brian Flores. I think he's pretty good. If he brings in a good OC, obviously, that would make a big difference. But anyone else than that, I wouldn't be too happy. It'd be Brian Flores, our offensive coordinator. So we'll go from there. I think Ben Johnson, Brian Flores will be the finalists for this position. We'll talk
Yeah.
soon, I guess.
Yeah, I'll say one thing about Flores. I definitely want to talk about him more. I think he can grow in the eyes of a lot of Bears fans, and he can definitely be a viable candidate for the long-term success. There's just a lot of questions that have to be answered, but I actually do believe that he learned a lot from his experience with Tua and his head coaching experience with the Dolphins. So we'll see. Maybe he can convince the Bears, and if that's the case, I could probably be convinced as well. But we'll see. And we'll talk to you guys hopefully when there's more news about this head coaching search.
Thank you guys again.